Imagine picking up a new story without reading the title, flipping to the end, and scanning a few words, not reading the sentences, but just simply picking out random words from random sentences. What are the odds that you will understand what you've read? What are the odds that those random disconnected words would actually make sense together? And how likely would it be that you would be able to draw any substantive, accurate conclusions about the story as a whole? Next to zero. Very likely, you wouldn't merely have no idea what the story is actually about, but you would also draw false conclusions about that story because of your approach. I would argue this is how most people approach understanding the world. Most people know little to nothing about history or the ideas of the past and merely keep up with current events, their favorite influencers, podcasts, the news, and social media feeds. They pick up the story in the newest pages and they scan for random words. They think they can understand what's going on. They think the knowledge they're immersing themselves in matters. A person can have lots of knowledge about things that are completely irrelevant, and lots of knowledge doesn't necessarily equate understanding. I myself have focused way too much over the past year keeping up with current events to the neglect of the story as a whole. I was shocked when I discovered this idea. Instead of spending so much time on what's happening now, I could be spending more time on understanding what got us here, which would therefore help me understand what was happening now far more than merely seeing news feeds. Consider the people who exclusively get their information about the world from the news and social media feeds. They tend to be fickle, temperamental people. Their emotions fluctuate with every headline, and they forget about it the next day. It's a natural consequence of immersing ourselves in so much unhelpful information. With the overwhelming ubiquity of social media, it's hard not to give into the temptation to conduct ourselves in this way. It's not a good way to live. There's nothing inherently wrong with the recent or the new. Important things happen, valuable books are written, helpful podcasts exist, though I believe all of these things are exceedingly rare. But we also need to realize the natural tendency to attribute importance to things that aren't actually important. Just because I think something is important doesn't mean it's actually important. I've become increasingly convinced over the past year that to truly understand the world that we live in, we don't need to listen to the news, keep up with current events, follow everything that influencers say, or even anything that influencers say, for that matter. I, in fact, believe that doing these things often actually hinders our ability to understand the world. Most people read a book here or there on the most recent pages, but a wise person doesn't read stories this way. We should be able to read the world like a story. If we understand the kinds of themes, types of characters, and the flow of the plot, we'll be able to process the new information we receive a lot better. But the only way to do that is to actually study the whole story. To truly understand our world, we need to start much farther back. Understanding the present requires us to understand the past. To that end, I have 3 C.S. Lewis books that I believe are required reading for understanding the world that we live in today. I'm going to break down the lessons I've learned from them and how they are particularly prescient for us this year especially. A reply to Professor Haldane is an unfortunately little-known essay in the book Of Other Worlds. I read this for the first time last year and was shocked at how accurately it described ideologies creeping into our culture today. It was as if Lewis was talking about the 2020s and not the 1960s. These ideas are not actually new, they're old. They're as old as the serpent in the garden. Many people point to The Abolition of Man as the book that gets to the heart of C.S. Lewis's cosmic trilogy, Out of the Silent Planet, Perelandra, and That Hideous Strength. I don't disagree, but I think a reply to Professor Haldane sums up his thoughts about the trilogy far more clearly, directly, and succinctly. The Abolition of Man is a great companion because both it and the trilogy explore many of the same themes, but a reply to Professor Haldane is a direct response to a critic about the books themselves, where he directly lays out his thoughts. These are some excerpts from the essay that I found particularly prescient. Quote, "If you must reduce the romance, Lewis's cosmic trilogy, to a proposition, the proposition would be almost the converse of that which the professor supposes. Not, scientific planning will currently lead to hell, but, under modern conditions, any effective invitation to hell will certainly appear in the guise of scientific planning, as Hitler's regime in fact did. Every tyrant must begin by claiming to have what his victims respect and to give them what they want. The majority in most modern countries respect science and want to be planned. And therefore, almost by definition, if any man or group wishes to enslave us, it, of course, would describe itself as scientific planned democracy. It may be true that any real salvation must equally, though by hypothesis truthfully, describe itself as scientific planned democracy. All the more reason to look very carefully at anything which bears that label. My fears of such a tyranny will seem to the professor either insincere or pusillanimous. For him, the danger is all in the opposite direction, in the chaotic selfishness of individualism. I must try to explain why I fear the more disciplined cruelty of some ideological oligarchy. The professor has his own explanation of this. He thinks I am unconsciously motivated by the fact that, quote, I stand to lose by social change. And indeed, it would be hard for me to welcome a change that might well consign me into a concentration camp. I might add that it would be likewise easy for the professor to welcome a change that might place him in the highest rank of an omnicompetent oligarchy. That's why the motive game is so uninteresting. Each side can go on playing ad nauseum. But when all the mud has been flung, every man's views still remain to be considered on their merits. I decline the motive game and resume the discussion. I do not hope to make Professor Haldane agree with me, but I should like him at least to understand why I think devil worship is a real possibility. I am a Democrat, C.S. Lewis says a little bit later in the essay. I am a Democrat, and he doesn't mean a modern American Democrat, but someone who values democracy. I am a Democrat because I believe that no man or group of men is good enough to be trusted with uncontrolled power over others. And the higher the pretensions of such power, the more dangerous I think it both to the rulers and to the subjects. Hence, theocracy is the worst of all governments. If we must have a tyrant robber baron, it is far better than an inquisitor. The baron's cruelty may sometimes sleep, his cupidity at some point be sated, and since he dimly knows he is doing wrong, he may possibly repent. But the inquisitor who mistakes his own cruelty and lust of power and fear for the voice of heaven will torment us infinitely, because he torments us with the approval of his own conscience, and his better impulses appear to him as temptations. And since theocracy is the worst, the nearer any government approaches to theocracy, the worse it will be. Being a Democrat, I am opposed to all very drastic and sudden changes of society in whatever direction, because they never, in fact, take place except by a particular technique. That technique involves a seizure of power by a small, highly disciplined group of people. The terror and the secret police follow, it would seem, automatically. I do not think any group good enough to have such power. They are men of like passions with ourselves. The secrecy and discipline of their organization will have already inflamed in them a passion of the inner ring, which I think at least as corrupting as avarice. And their ideological pretensions will have lent all their passions the dangerous prestige of the cause. Hence, in whatever direction the change is made, it is for me down by its modus operandi. The worst of all public dangers is the Committee of Public Safety. The character in That Hideous Strength, whom the professor never mentions, is Miss Hardcastle, the chief of the secret police. She is the common factor in all revolutions, and as she says, you won't get anyone to do her job unless they get some kick out of it. I must, of course, admit that the actual state of affairs may be so bad that a man is tempted to risk change, even by revolutionary methods, to say that desperate diseases require desperate remedies, and that necessity knows no law. But to yield to this temptation, I think, is fatal. It is under that pretext that every abomination enters. Hitler, the Machiavellian prince, the Inquisition, the witch doctor, all claimed to be necessary. That was from a reply to Professor Haldane from Of Other Worlds on page 126 to 130. Highly recommended. Hell is a tyranny that seeks to implement some sort of ideological oligarchy, which means rule by elites. Not individualism. It hates the individual. Hell loves the collective. It loves a kind of twisted, singular, undifferentiated unity. If you've read That Hideous Strength, consider the embrace in chapter 11 between Wither and Frost. Also consider Lewis's depiction of unity in hell in the Screwtape Letters, and notice how that compares to the collectivism and the denial of individualism within the NICE, the NICE. All that to say, people exercising unlimited power in the name of God are hellish, to say the least. Lewis would say that there is nothing Christian at all about desiring a tyranny, praising the values of tyrants, desiring that human beings have unlimited power over other human beings, crushing your enemies in the name of God, downplaying individualism for collectivism, or instituting a human-led theocracy. Let the reader understand. Human-led theocracies are self-contradictions and fundamentally idol worship. It's putting a human being in the place of God. In fact, it's not only not Christian, it's exactly the opposite. It's satanic. It's a literal devil worship. And it's falsely wearing the name of Christ for the explicit purpose, knowingly or unknowingly, to lead people not toward him, but away from him into hell. It's fundamentally a lie. And good lies always sound true. They sound good. The more bits of truth a lie has in it, the more effective it is. Lewis's first essay in The Abolition of Man, Men Without Chests, is primarily about twisting language for the purpose of propaganda and deception. Strake, a character in That Hideous Strength, was a man calling himself both a Christian and a pastor who regularly prophesied and quoted Bible verses, proclaiming coming fire and brimstone on God's enemies. And he was also an atheist. He ultimately believed that God is something that men have the ability to create or to become. And this was at the core of this quote-unquote Christian pastor's belief. Idol worship. Quote, this is from Strake. "Neither a historical fact or a fable, young man," he said, "but a prophecy. All the miracles, shadows of things to come. Get rid of false spirituality. It is all going to happen here in this world. In the only world there is. What did the Master tell us? Heal the sick, cast out devils, raise the dead. We shall. The Son of Man, that is, man himself, full grown, has the power to judge the world, to distribute life without end, and punishment without end. You shall see here and now." That Hideous Strength, that is from chapter 3. In Lewis's book, The Last Battle, this was the exact same ideology that finally destroyed Narnia. An evil ape named Shift deceived the people so that he could institute a tyranny in the name of Aslan, with himself as the true head. In reality, he worshipped Tash, a violent, bloodthirsty, human sacrifice-loving, war-hungry demon. The demon Tash was worshipped by a desert people to the south with clear parallels to Islam, and Islam's violent, bloodthirsty demon god, Allah, who also pretends to be the God of the Bible. C.S. Lewis hated sacralism, a muddy intertwining of the church and the civil government. Instead, C.S. Lewis argued for mere Christianity. He argued for a proper understanding of separate spheres of government that would defend against both the theocratic atrocities of the Roman Catholic Church and the pseudo-religious identitarianism of the Nazis. And most importantly, Lewis argued for clear, plain truth. When hell comes, it always attempts to disguise itself as something good, but to accomplish this, it has to obscure and deceive. Truth always comes from heaven, and lies always comes from hell. Those living at St. Anne's in That Hideous Strength spoke plainly, clearly, and always truthfully. They spoke the truth even when there was a risk of damaging their goals and scaring Jane off. Truth was more important than their supposed mission because truth was their mission. In other words, they acted like Christians because they were Christians. The language of the nice, in contrast, obscured, muddled, and deceived. There was no clarity in anything. Any attempt from Mark to get a clear answer out of even a single person at the nice about anything whatsoever was impossible. To the nice and to hell, absorbing people into their collective was the ultimate goal and should be achieved by any means necessary, truth be damned. These aren't new ideas. They weren't even new to Lewis. The reason his stories and essays seem prophetic today isn't because he could predict the future. It's because he knew the past. Lewis was reading the story that he was in. The problems he saw then were the exact same kinds of problems we should see today if we're reading the story we're in well. They're also exactly the same kinds of problems that Adam and Eve faced in the garden. The serpent, pretending to care about righteousness and godliness, gave Adam and Eve a lie disguised as the truth in order to destroy them. It's no different than the story of That Hideous Strength. The moral of the story is, if you want to be a good character in this story, seek truth and clarity above all else. That's how we really combat lies. We don't destroy lies with lies. We don't damage evil with evil. We don't dismantle deception with deception. We don't expose obscurity with obscurity. Good people do good, and they always have, and they always will.